Magnificent. Hello, I hope you can hear me. If you can, do please put a yes in the chat. It's wonderful to be talking to you today about conflict. So let's get into some conflict here. Before we start, let me know what sort of people have you ever had conflict with? Tell me, is it your boss? Is it your family? Is it your peers? Is it the team you're working with? Put a word in the chat that just says team, boss, mum, dad, family, something like that. I won't tell anyone, I promise. Just to have an idea here. Not, of course, that you're having that conflict now. That was in the past. That's why you're here. You see, you're here to learn about how we can do this better and why it might even be a good idea to encourage some conflict. Because you know what? Conflict isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's not really a bad thing. It can be a bad thing, but it's not always a bad thing. It is, in its essence, a problem wrapped up in emotion. That's where we get it from. All great relationships, including marriages, parents, friendships, businesses, they all need productive conflict in order to thrive. That's the challenge. Conflicts at work, they're very often viewed as just as a bad thing, full stop. And the higher up that management ladder you go, the more people tend to avoid the conflict-filled debates and the creative conversations that you really need if you want to be a high-performing team. So there are conflicts that are unhealthy and they do need to be fixed. Conflicts with your boss, conflicts with your peers, conflict with your direct reports. But in order to be able to manage that really well, you need to be able to see both sides of the problem. You need to be really willing to look at the role that you play in the conflict and not assume that you're right or not assume that you are the victim. Have you ever felt the victim of a conflict? Have you ever been thinking that you're on the losing side of this? If you ever felt like that, stick a yes in the chat here. Let me know. There's a thing about embracing conflict. How do you actually lean into something like that? Knowing the difference between the productive stuff and the destructive stuff is really vital. Productive conflict, that's where you can have conflict around plans, have a conflict around ideas. You never really attack people themselves. You only attack their ideas. Now, what you'll see is that your team members start to argue or to get frustrated. They become emotional in a good way. Somebody looking at that sort of conflict from the outside, they might only see the argument. They might see it as being heated or unpleasant. But somebody from the inside of a good team, when you're using conflict to find the best solutions in the shortest time, you really get the opportunity to discuss things, to resolve issues really quickly, and to come out of the other end of that sort of conflict with no bad feelings, no hardships. It's really refreshing, it's really empowering, and you're ready to move on to the next sets of challenges that you have. If you've ever had that sort of conflict, stick a big C or something in the chat there, that positive conflict. I know, put a little plus sign in, positive conflict, because that's wonderful. So some of the best meetings and some of the best creative moments I've ever had are like that. Now, what you find sometimes in teams that are maybe new or they're not formed well enough is, or the leaders are actually too nice, is some teams might avoid that sort of positive conflict because they just don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Or the leader, their most challenging impulse is the desire to protect their team from harm. Your job, if you're a good leader, is actually to stop people getting hurt, to stop people feeling bad about things. And the challenge is that if you cut those disagreements short because we think we're protecting people from being offended or being upset, you can actually stand in the way of getting them fixed, stand in the way of resolving those hard issues, and as quickly as you otherwise could. And the problems just last longer. And so what happens then is you end up stopping your team members from learning how to deal with good management, learning how to develop good conflict management skills. And the really bad bit is when people end up using the back channels and they use them to attack other people or to manipulate their ways to getting them to the top of the file, their ideas to the top of the pile. And those can be mean. That can be harmful. That can be personal. That can be a lot worse than just simply directly confronting the problem there. So, good versus bad conflict, right? I wonder what sort of conflict can be good? What sort of conflict can be bad? What can you experience here? Well, the teams that really embrace healthy conflict, they're the ones that save time and energy. They're the ones that get to the point a lot faster than anybody else possibly can, than any other team ever would. And they do it because they're open. They do it because they don't continually circle painful issues without ever resolving them. Every time somebody says, let's take that offline, that's a bad idea. That's a red flag for this sort of problem. Now, as long as your team members think that this sort of healthy argument is actually bad and unnecessary, the longer you're going to struggle to be able to create this sort of productive environment that you really need. You need to build a trusting environment, one where it is open, what's the words I'm looking for here? It's highly collaborative. That's what I'm looking for, right? You can do so much more, so much faster with healthy conflict. If you're afraid of conflict, you waste so much time and energy politicking, managing and jockeying your position in relationships with other people. And the meetings are boring. Have you ever been in a boring meeting? Right? Put the word boring in my put the word boring in there. Somebody will see it afterwards and think that I was boring. Put the word bad meeting or something like that in there as well. Just to see, because I've had so many bad meetings because people are just too nice, they're dancing around the issue, they're not actually getting to the point. On the other hand, teams that engage in healthy conflict have lively or interesting meetings. You can put in the word as interesting. There you go, type that in. Interesting. Because they discuss the difficult things, they solve difficult problems quickly. And that healthy conflict, that really minimizes politics and it helps extract and exploit everyone's ideas. So, how do you do conflict? If you prepare your team in advance that you're looking for creative conflict, and that's together with setting the ground rules of only attacking ideas and never attacking the person, it can really help to get people to remind each other why conflict is necessary in the moment. Now, I find that telling people we really need your disagreement, it can drain tension. It can really give people the confidence and the permission to begin. I pay you for using your opinions. It is your job role to disagree at this point. That can actually help people open up because you're telling them what you're going to do. You're telling them that they are allowed to attack somebody else's ideas and opinions, and that their ideas and opinions in turn may be attacked, but they as a person will be safe. And that's really empowering. You can also have somebody who has a role, and I read this somewhere, of a conflict miner. Somebody whose job it is to dig in and pull out those hidden disagreements, pull them out into the open. Now that needs to be a really objective person, somebody who's really courageous enough to keep the team working through the difficult issues until you get to the next challenge is where it becomes unproductive. Everybody sees conflict differently, and that makes managing it really hard. The same conflict can be seen by one person as all-out war, and it can be seen by another person as just a great opportunity to discuss different viewpoints. You can have two movies playing on the same screen. It's the same story, the same picture, but it's been watched by two different people in two entirely different ways. Now, you then add a third person into the mix, and what you get is a really confusing picture you're trying to paint here. So the key strength that you need to build on is that of being able to see the other side of conflict without judgment. Now, just as you might think the other person is horribly misguided, you might think that you or your ideas are wrong. The result of that sort of unmanaged conflict can be really uncomfortable. It can really it can lead to anger in a relationship. It really addictive behavior. You're going to start feeling fearful. You're going to be resentful about things. So there are three types of conflict that we're going to look at now, and that's conflict with your direct reports, conflict with your peers, and with your boss. The essence of them all is very similar. You're going to sense there's an overlap, and the approach is quite It's almost the same, but it does depend on your position. And it's your positional position, where you are in the organization and what your authority and power is. At its base, you must know thyself. So know yourself and appreciate that the other person thinks that they are right too. Okay? They think that they're right. Appreciate that they think that they're right. And understand that you're right. It should be wrong. So if you've got conflict with a direct report, first thing to think about before you overthink anything here, is this just one of those instances where your team member, the person who works for you, just needs to do what they're told? You've made a decision. They need to follow that direction you've given them and get on with it, right? That's the thing. It is rare that you need to simply tell someone what to do unless you're managing fairly transactional working. In which case, go back, reset, restart your expectation setting to work clearly, and then look perhaps to have them reformulate what you've asked them to do and have them explain the task that they need to do. And that's more like what's called tight, 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 rather than tight, loose, tight. So that's tight on expectation setting, tight on the how to do the task, and then tight on the as opposed to tight on the expectation setting, loose on how they can go about doing it, because that's what you're asked for, but tight on holding them accountable. Most modern organizations need to be more than just a compliance group. You know, you need more than just compliance people. Just doing what they're told in a fairly complex environment is going to be impossible to sustain. You might as well just do it yourself, frankly. So, conflict. Start with recognizing both sides of the problem. Assess your own behavior. Assess your own performance first. Take ownership of your own part in it. Don't assume that the source is the other person or some external issue. Look to yourself first. Fix your own management of them if you need to by resetting your expectation. Recognize that there might be other ways of doing things than yours, and recognize what set you off. If you're annoyed about this, if you're considering that this is a conflict environment, what's triggered you? What has set you off? What was the red flag that set you off? And breathe deeply. Move yourself from the situation if it's really unpleasant. But think that conflict is not negotiation. You're not trying to be weak. You're not losing here. Most people have different feelings about this. Try to be objective. Imagine you are an outsider looking in just for a minute. What is it you're seeing here? What are you going to try and advise? Differences of opinion make your team stronger and more creative. Is this one of those good conflicts you should be nurturing rather than something you need to squash? Feelings of fear, feelings of loss make people feel quite frustrated and uncertain. So if things are changing in your world, you've got to provide support. You've got to listen to what they're saying. You've got to acknowledge their feelings. And then, just as you would plan a difficult conversation, you need to plan for this. Okay? So, what are the potential outcomes, consequences for both of you? Is this a quick fix? Or is this something that's going to help the person's development? Or is this actually a performance issue? What is the right place for it? Is it a quick chat at the desk? Is it a coffee or a call? Is it lunch? Is it a formal meeting? You've got to choose appropriately given the type of conflict, because that where you meet really sends the right message to them. Then you go off, you gather all the facts together. You do that without judging the other person, and you ask good questions, and you're as objective as you possibly can be. Then during the session, you want to be clear with that person that you want to work with them to find a solution to the challenge. You're trying to find a solution to the problem. The problem is the problem. The person is not the problem. So you define the problem from your point of view, and you ask them from their point of view. You find out where you agree, you find out where you disagree, and you keep the conversation on the problem, not the person. If you find yourself saying, you always, back off and think about what the problem is. Don't talk about the person here. And then together, and think of this as an opportunity, together with the closest person to the problem apart from you, is you can together identify and evaluate what are potential solutions for that set of problems. And then you can together create a plan to fix that. And you put in some formal feedback sessions and progress checks and make sure it's actually going to take place. And then afterwards, take some time to reflect, consider what you learned, and then there's a reflection worksheet that I can send out. So if you want that, I'll send some links to the attendees of this. So if you want the things that were document or doc into the thing here, into the chat here, I'll send that out. I might send it out to everybody anyway. So that's conflict with a team member. Conflict with a peer. Now, of course, your peer group, your team, your true team, your one true team, are the people at the same level as you in the organization. It's not the people who work for you. When you've got conflict that comes up with the person that you're working with as a peer across your business, your first position there has to be with a partner because you are competing with them. It's you again, plus them again, versus the problem. Rather than seeing them as an adversary or somebody to battle against, each of you has a different view of the problem, and that's a benefit. It's a great benefit. Think of it as a benefit. You've got a conflict. Great. It gives you an opportunity to test your ideas, to improve how you're working. It's not a battle to be overcome. It's an opportunity. Use it to your benefit. Treat it as a great, strong starting point for resolution, rather than as an obstacle you need to battle against. Now, you're not going to be able to avoid conflict between you and your peers. You just can't. So you need to manage it. You can examine three big things to learn how to do this better. One is your hot buttons. What just triggered you to become angry or ineffective in however you're working here? Why has this become a difficult to manage piece of conflict? Okay. Two, what do you think is actually important here? What are your values? How are you situated in comparison to your peer? What do your peer find important here? And then three, think about your own power in the organization and then understand how that influences how you could go about resolving your conflict. When you sit with your peer and you talk about the issue behind your conflict, come with an open mind. Come with, even when you sit down, I like to sit next to somebody so we're physically lined up next to each other, facing the problem. If you actually tell them, I'm here with an open mind trying to solve this together with you, it can be quite powerful. Take a walk in their shoes. Right? So, what is their point of view? What is their motivation? And how have they reacted to this? Use your deep, active listening skills here to dig into the real reasons, reformulate their understanding of the problem, summarize it, use silence, and then examine the flaws in your own position in those moments as well. So then you look for and you compare your motives, goals, agendas, and you try and build a solution together. You're looking for initial points of mutual agreement. Okay, so you want for the small, easy things that you both agree on, and then you look at the big ones and the bigger. Build up small elements of agreement towards success. Knowing what triggers you. Think about how you express your emotions in a helpful way, a positive way. Choose your words carefully. Think about trying to find the best in people. Assume positive intent until you're sure differently. Find the best in people. Find the best in the situation. Be optimistic. Avoid sarcasm and cynicism. Keep a sense of humor. It's quite challenging to deal with a problem with your peer, but it's such an opportunity. Is when you have a problem, somebody on your own team at your level, not the team who works for you, but the team you work with, such an opportunity to look into and try and solve something together with somebody else who's at your level. Third, conflict with your boss. Okay, as a manager, you've got a team, you're working for people. How you go about resolving conflict with your boss can really define the impact you can have on your organization. Full stop. And your conflict can come from lots of different situations or lots of different points of view. Maybe you're not clear how your work supports your boss or your company. You think you're doing your boss's job. She might think she's doing your job. You might each have different performance measures, different KPIs. You might each report to different stakeholders, so you're motivated in different directions. Maybe you were upped. Maybe you applied for the boss's job. The boss is not a part of your position. Your boss might be looking to you for information and is thinking that you think you're doing a good job. she thinks you're failing to do it. She doesn't think it's the right thing. Two different sets of styles, two different values. You think that's a conflict rather than a compliment. Maybe you feel with the boss's big picture. That's compliment. It's not conflict. You can work together on things like that. The first thing is to consider is why is the conflict there in the first place? Most managers are reasonable communicators because it's part of the job description, but their ability can vary wildly. So I would start by identifying what the expectations your boss has of you, and then try and ask them for some guidance on what do they think success looks like, and then you can work out how to go about getting there. You can also ask for feedback. You can get some formal feedback or just informal feedback from your boss for a start. Talk to them, your peers, from their reports, from other people in your organization. If you look around your organization, if you look and see who's getting the resources, who's getting promoted, who's getting rewarded, what is it that they're doing that you're not? How can you adapt or adopt some behaviors that you don't have or you're not actually accentuating? And then lastly, you can look up what did your boss's boss expect? Because that's going to tell you a lot about what your boss wants from you. Ask the other people who report to your boss or used to report to your boss for some advice as well. Ultimately, you need to be aware of the things that might trigger you emotionally to feel as if you're in conflict. And then think about the strategies you use to avoid dealing with conflict, because that can be good if it's a really horrible situation you need to time and put off to a specific moment. But realistically, you have to be clear of the reality of the situation. Who are you in conflict with? What is the source of your conflict? When will you meet them? Where will you meet them appropriate for the situation? Why will you meet them? What do you hope to gain from not victory, but a good solution together? Try and see things from the other person's point of view. Speak to them. Suspend your own judgment. Ask open questions if you understand their point of view, and then look for common ground and find a solution together. Try and build up a plan so you can address whatever the issues are, update each other on progress, and then evaluate and learn. Right, the last thing to say is that teams that embrace healthy conflict, they actually save a lot of time and energy. Conflict, when you handle it right, can help you to create a workplace that thrives, that is really rewarding, really exciting, because it's built on trust. So, your homework. Next time some conflict comes up, I want you to start by examining yourself and then look to really understand the other person's point of view. Okay? So hopefully that's given you some idea of what you can do. What I want to do now is I just want to tell you 2 seconds on what else I can help you with. What I do is I have a management training session. I'm going to try and share my clever screen. I can do this. It should be right there. So I offer group training for managers, and it's a very clever session of 18 topics covering everything you might ever want to see. If I can find this slide there, but that's the one. Leading some, leading others. 18 topics spread out over 9 weeks, 30 minutes a topic, twice a week, with an open clinic, and it's for managers. So if you are a manager of any description, these are the things you need to know in order to manage yourself, in order to manage others effectively. And the structure of it is such that you get someone in a Zoom call that's documented, you have all the hit tips and helps and guides and things like that as well. And then the breakout is something like we have it on a Tuesday and a Thursday at 9 o'clock in the morning sometime, 30 minutes, and then every second week, open clinic where we can live stuff. If you're interested in that, I'll send you the links out in part of the session, and I'm delighted to help you as well. Thank you ever so much for paying attention. It's been a useful session. Let me know what you think in the comments here, and have a great day.